Well, hello, boys and girls. I have a special story for you today. Now, this story is called a folk tale. Now, that means the story started out and has been passed down from families to people through generations. That means could be hundreds of years. It's a very special story because usually it starts out with a little bit of truth, but it gets expanded because the people in the story are so special. And by the end of the story, we learn a very important lesson, a moral, as you say. So, I am going to share with you today the story of John Henry. John Henry by Julius Lester. Pictures by Jerry Pinkney. You probably never heard of John Henry, or maybe you heard about him but don't know the ins and outs of his comings and goings. Well, that's why I'm going to tell you about him. When John Henry was born, birds came from everywhere to see him. The bears and the panthers and moose and deer and rabbits and squirrels and even a unicorn came out of the woods to see him. Instead of the sun tending to his business and going to bed, it was peeking out from behind the moon's skirts trying to get a glimpse of this new baby. Before long, Mama and Papa came out on the porch to show off their brand new baby. The birds oohed and the animals awed at how handsome the baby was. Somewhere in the middle of one of those oohs, or maybe was it one of those backside of those ahs, that the baby jumped out of his mama's arms and started growing. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until his head and shoulders busted through the roof, which was over the porch. John Henry thought that was the funniest thing in the world. He laughed so loud the sun got scared. It skirted from behind the moon skirts and went to bed, which is where it should have been the whole time. The next morning, John Henry was up at sunrise, and the sun wasn't. He was tired, and he decided to sleep in. John Henry wasn't going to have none of that. He hollered up into the sky, "Get up from there! I got things to do, and I need some light to work by." The sun yawned, washed his face and flossed and brushed his teeth and hurried up over the horizon. That day, John Henry helped his papa rebuild the porch he had busted through the morning before. Then he added on a couple of wings to the houses, one with an indoor swimming pool and one of them, what are they called? Jacuzzis. After lunch, he chopped down an acre of trees and split them into fireplace logs and still had time to nap before supper. John Henry was a hard-working young man. The next day, John Henry went to town. He met up with the meanest man in the state. His name was Ferret-Faced Freddy, and he was sitting on a big white horse. You know what he was doing? Well, he was thinking of mean things to do. Ferret-Faced Freddy was so mean, he cried every time he had a nice thought. John Henry said, "Freddy, I'll make you a bet. Let's have a race. You on your horse, me on my legs. If you and your horse win, you can work me as hard as you want for a whole year. If I win, you have to be nice for a full year. Ferret face Freddy laughed an evil laugh. It's a deal, John Henry. His voice sounded like bat wings on a tombstone. The next morning, folks lined up all along the way of the race. John Henry was ready. Ferret-faced Freddy and his horse were ready. Then, bang! The race was on. My great-granddaddy's brothers, cousins, sister-in-law's uncle, his uncle's aunt, that's right, was there that morning. She said everybody saw Ferret-faced Freddy ride on his big white horse, and they were sure enough moving. Didn't nobody see John Henry. That's because he was so fast that the wind was out of breath trying to keep up with him. When Ferret-faced Freddy crossed the finish line, John Henry was already on the other side, sitting in a rocking chair and drinking a soda mom. After that, Ferret-faced Freddy was so nice, everybody called him Frederick the Friendly. John Henry decided it was time for him to go on down the big road. He went home and told his mama and daddy goodbye. His daddy said, "You got to have something to make your way in this world with son. These belong to your granddaddy." And he gave him 2 20-pound sledgehammers with 4-foot handles made of whalebone. A day or so later, John Henry saw a crew building a road. At least that's what they were doing until they came on to what they thought was a boulder. Ooh, but this was no ordinary boulder. It was as hard as an angry day, and so big around it took half a week for a tall man to walk from one side to the other. That's a big boulder, isn't it? John Henry offered to lend them a hand. "That's all right, we'll put some dynamite to it." John Henry smiled to himself. "Whatever you say." The road crew planted dynamite all around the rock, and then they set it off. Kaboom! Blam! Kaboom! Blam! Boom! Boom! Bang! Boom! Blang! That dynamite made so much racket that the Almighty looked over the parapets of heaven and hollered, "It's getting too noisy down there." The dynamite kicked up so much dirt and dust it got dark. So dark that the moon thought night had caught up her napping and had hurried out so fast she almost bumped into the sun, who was still climbing the steep hill towards noontime. With all that commotion from the dynamite was over, the road crew was amazed. You see, the boulder was still there. In fact, the dynamite hadn't even knocked off a chip off of it. The crew didn't know what to do. Then they heard a rumbling noise. They looked around. It was John Henry laughing. He said, "You gentlemen would give me a little room? I got some work to do. Don't you see how you can do what you do with dynamite couldn't? said the boss of the crew. John Henry chuckled. Just watch me. He swung one of his hammers round and round his head. It made such a wind that the leaves blew off the trees and the birds fell out of the sky. Ring! The hammer hit the boulder. That boulder shivered like you could on a cold winter morning when it looks like the school bus never going to come. Ring! The boulder shivered like the morning when freedom came to the slaves. John Henry picked up the other hammer. He swung one hammer in the circle over his head. As soon as it hit the rock, ring! Whoo! Ring! The hammer in his left hand started to make the circle, and ring! Soon the ring of one hammer followed the ring of the other one. So closely it sounded like they were falling at the same time. Ring, 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 ring! Chip and dust were flying from the boulder so fast that John Henry vanished from sight. But you could still hear his hammers. Ring, ring! The air seemed to be dancing on rhythm of his hammers. The boss of the road crew looked up. His mouth dropped open. He pointed into the sky. There in the air above the boulders was a rainbow. John Henry was swinging those hammers so fast he was making a rainbow around his shoulders. It was shining and shimmering in the dust and grit like hope that never dies. John Henry started singing. I got a rainbow, ring, ring, tied round my shoulder, ring, ring, ain't gonna rain, no it ain't gonna rain, ring, ring. John Henry sang and he hammered and the air danced and the rainbow shimmered and the earth shook and rolled from the plows of the hammer. Finally, it was quiet. Slowly, the dust cleared. Folks could not believe their eyes. The boulder was gone. In the place was the prettiest and straightest road there had ever been. Not only had John Henry pulverized the boulder into pebbles, he had finished building the road. It was in the distance where the new road connected to the main one. The road crew saw John Henry waving goodbye. A hammer on each shoulder, the rainbow still draped around him like pure love. John Henry went on his way. He had heard that any good man, good with a hammer, could find work building the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad through West Virginia. That was where he had been going when he stopped to build that road. The next day, John Henry arrived at the railroad. However, work had stopped. The railroad tracks had to go through a mountain, and such a mountain it was. Next to it, even John Henry felt small. But a worker told John Henry about a new machine they were going to use to tunnel through that mountain. It was called a steam drill. It can hammer faster and harder than any man, and it will never have to stop and rest. The next day, the boss arrived with the steam drill. John Henry said to it, "Let me have a contest. Your steam drill against me and my hammers." The man laughed. "I heard you were the best there ever was, John Henry, but even you can't out-hammer a machine." "Well, let's find out," said John Henry. Boss shrugged. "Don't make me no never mind. You start on the other side of the mountain. I'll start the steam drill over here." Whoever gets to the middle first is the winner. The next morning was so still. The birds weren't singing and the roosters weren't crowing. When the son didn't hear the rooster, he wondered if something was wrong, so he rose a couple of minutes early to see. What he saw was a mountain as big as hurt feelings. On one side was a big machine hooked up to hoses. It was belching smoke and steam as the machine attacked the mountain. Rocks and dirt and underbrush flew into the air. Now on the other side was John Henry. Next to the mountain, he didn't look much bigger than a wish that wasn't going to go far. He was a 20-pound hammer in each hand and muscles hard as wisdom in each arm. As he swung them through the air, he shone like silver. And when the hammers hit the rock, they rang like gold. Before long, tongues of fire leaped out of each blow. They were going through the mountain. Wow, it's a big mountain, isn't it, boys and girls? Now, on the other side, the boss of the steam drill felt the mountain shudder. He got scared and hollered, "I believe the mountain's going to cave in." From the darkness inside the mountain came a deep voice. "It's just my hammer sucking the wind. Just my hammer sucking the wind." There wasn't enough room inside the tunnel for the rainbow, so it wrapped itself around the mountain on the side where John Henry was. All through the night, John Henry and the steam drill went at it. In the light from the tongues of fire shouting out from the tunnel, from John Henry's hammer blows, folks could see the rainbow wrapped around the mountain like a shawl. Then the sun came up extra early the next morning to see who was winning. Just as it did, John Henry broke through and met the steam drill. The boss of the steam drill was flabbergasted. You see, John Henry had come 1.25 miles. The steam drill had only come 1/4 mile. Folks were cheering and they were yelling, "John Henry! John Henry!" John Henry walked out of the tunnel into the sunlight and raised his arms over his head, a hammer in each hand. The rainbow slid off the mountain and round his shoulders. With a big smile, John Henry's eyes closed, and he slowly fell to the ground. John Henry was dead. He had hammered so hard and so fast and so long that his big heart had burst. Everybody was silent for a minute. Then came the sound of soft crying. Some said that the crying came from the moon. Another one said she saw that the sun had shed a tear. Then something strange happened. Afterwards, folks swore the rainbow whispered it. I don't know, but whether it was a whisper or a thought, everyone had the same knowing at the same moments. Dying ain't important. Everybody does that. What matters is how well you do when you're living. First one person started clapping, then another one and another. Soon everybody was clapping. The next morning, the sun got up extra early just to say goodbye to John Henry. They put him on a flatbed railroad car. Then the train made it slowly out of the mountains. All along the way, folks lined both sides of the tracks, and they were cheering and shouting through their tears, "John Henry! John Henry!" John Henry's body was taken to Washington, D.C. Some people say that he was buried on the White House lawn late one night while the president and Mrs. President were asleep. I don't know about none of that. What I do know is this. Yes, if you walk by the White House late at night, standing real still and listening real closely, folks say you can just might hear a deep voice singing, "I got a rainbow ring, ring, tied round my shoulder, ring, ring. Ain't gonna rain, no it ain't gonna rain, ring, ring." And that's the story of John Henry. May have not ended as happily as we like for our stories, but we did find out a very important lesson from John Henry. It's not about what people say about you. It's about how you live your life. Are you doing good things with your life? Are you doing things for other people? That's how you're going to be remembered. And that's how you make a name for yourself. Not the clothes you wear, not how popular, or if you're on social media, how many likes you get. It's about what you're doing with your life. Think about that today, boys and girls. And what's something extra kind and extra special you might could do for somebody? And now, go out and do it. Well, you have a great day, my friends. And as always, I will see you later.